Hey guys, SoCal Val here. You are listening to the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast.
Welcome everybody back to another episode of the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast. I'm your host, Andy Burrows. As you can see or hear, I am joined by my illustrious co-host, Mr. Adam Cousins. Adam, I know you're a little bit under weather, man. I know you're not feeling 100%, so I appreciate you joining us today, mate. How are you? You getting better?
Well, by the doctors said no. They're changing my medication and they've sending me for x-rays. But I do have the luxury of being on a holiday at the moment in a lovely place called Cornwall with my folks. So that's taking a little bit of the pain away.
There you go then, mate. There you go. Anyone that's listened to our show over the last month, 2 months, we are big advocates of Rev Pro. We have literally fallen in love with this promotion. We've gone to London to see it. Adam's gone to recently. Adam and Rachel were at another event that they held. They've got the anniversary show coming up. We've bought London tickets. I'm thinking about jumping in the car and going to Portsmouth this weekend. One of the people that we met from Rev Pro when we attended our first event, we were very, very fortunate to sit right in front of the ring announcers. And I am honored to say that the Rev Pro ring announcer is joining the commentary team. Gio, how are you, my man? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
No worries. It's not every day you get to sit down with the commentary team from Rev Pro, man. We can usually waffle on, mate, but we've got like one of the gurus here from Rev Pro. Gio, we have literally fallen in love with Rev Pro the last couple of months, mate. It's such a tremendous promotion. But before we get to that, mate, we always like to talk about wrestling and how people fell in love with this crazy world of professional wrestling. Gio, before you become the great announcer that we all know you as now for Rev Pro, how did you fall in love with the crazy world that is professional wrestling?
My earliest memory of wrestling is probably in 2004, which would make me 9 years old. My brother and I were around at our cousins in Italy. And we'd never really seen wrestling before, or if we had, we didn't realize that's what wrestling was. We didn't know what WWE was. They had it on in the background in their kitchen. And I've racked my brain so many times trying to remember what the first match I ever saw was. Because I know it was either SmackDown or Velocity in 2004. And there was a guy in blue trunks and a guy in red trunks. And for years, I was convinced it was Heidenreich versus Paul London, but I've gone on Cage Match and I can't find that match, so I'm probably a little bit off. But that's my earliest memory of wrestling. And then we went back to England. We didn't have Sky at the time; we only had terrestrial TV, and our parents are very strict with bedtime, so didn't see wrestling again for a year. Then we got Sky, and so we got into wrestling fanatically around 2005. So I was 10, my brother was 8, and I was a fan for life. I was hooked. I became a fan a couple of months right before Eddie Guerrero died. So one of my earliest memories in wrestling is coming down and checking WWE.com and seeing he died. And I hid it from my brother because he was such an Eddie Guerrero fan. I didn't want to upset him. But he eventually found out you can't keep a secret forever. But yeah, ever since then, it's just been wrestling. And then when I turned 20, I thought, well, I have to give it a go. And here I am 7 years later, if my math is correct. Yeah. And it's the best decision I ever made.
Yeah, I mean, Gio, we always ask our guests, what do you think of the state of the wrestling business right now? Obviously, we're going to get to the Rev Pro stuff in a minute. Obviously, you're the voice of Rev Pro. What is the state of the wrestling business? We've been very fortunate. If you've caught some of our shows, we've interviewed like Vince Russo, EC3. We've got DDP coming up in a couple of weeks. It's always interesting when you get to hear people's different spectrums of how they think wrestling is. I mean, I get into it sometimes now. There's AEW, there's WWE, there's Impact, there's Rev Pro. There's so much content out there now. It's absolutely unbelievable. What do you think of the state is of professional wrestling right now?
I genuinely think it's the hottest it's been in decades. And I think that is the general consensus at the moment. I think even 1 or 2 years ago, especially during COVID, nobody would be saying that. But if you look at the record-breaking WrestleMania, the record-breaking Money in the Bank, the record-breaking SummerSlam, all in at Wembley, selling, was it 80,000 tickets with no matches announced? People are hot for wrestling. And also, I think for the first time in a long time, it's fair to say, is that wrestling is cool. For a long time, you know, it wasn't cool to say you're a wrestling fan. In the 90s, it was, when you're, you know, an American high schooler, you're walking around with an NWO shirt on, Too Sweet and Your Friends. It was cool.
I still do that now.
Yeah. We've always been cool, you know?
Yeah.
Then for years it wasn't, but recently it's just exploded. Even people I know outside of wrestling who know that that's what I do, but know nothing of wrestling, will send me the clips that go viral and say, is this you? And it never is. It's always Logan Paul in WWE or something. But I go, well, that is the business. But, you know, it's reaching the mainstream now, more so than it has in the past. Obviously, you know, wrestling, millions of homes around the world. But in the zeitgeist, I think it's just the hottest it's ever been, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Gio, what was the reaction? Friends, you mentioned friends and family there. You mentioned obviously growing up in Italy, then moved to the UK. How does that conversation go when you tell your parents and your friends, you go, I want to be a wrestler. I want to get involved in the wrestling business. We've spoke to like EC3 and people like this, and it's always a conversation, especially like from the UK. When you're here in the UK and you're like, Mum, I wouldn't mind having a go at this professional wrestling lark. And they're like, what? I mean, how did that go for you when you just first said that, like when you ventured, when you wanted to, how was the reaction amongst all your friends and family when you said, do you know what? I'm going to give this professional wrestling lark a go.
Well, my friends laughed at me. And my mum made me watch $1 Million Baby with her, and then just spoilers if you haven't seen $1 Million Baby, skip this bit, skip the next 30 seconds or so of me talking. But we just silently watched it, and then at the bit where she collapses on the ring stool, she just turns to me and go. And so that was her verdict on it. But, you know, I'm very thankful I didn't pick up any serious injuries in my in-ring career. Obviously, retired is a grandiose term for the sort of wrestling I was contributing. But I much prefer being on the announcing commentary side of things. And since I made the full-time switch to announcing and commentary, my friends and family have actually been very supportive. And I think that's really important in wrestling, to have a support system around you, because it's a draining business, it's a consuming business. If you aren't 100% into it, it can feel very overwhelming at times. So I'm very thankful and lucky I have a good support system around me.
Yeah, Gio, just to touch on that, because everyone can sit there and we can say all the time, so we can commentate on wrestling, we're good talkers and whatever. But it's not just a case of getting into a show and basically commentating. You have to relay the story that the wrestlers are trying to tell you in the ring. Now, sometimes they may give you some tips to say, make sure you say this, make sure you say that. But you do a lot of work, say homework, for want of a better phrase. You've got a show, like you've got a copper box coming up and you've got a list of matches coming up. Your focus probably even before now, would have been, I suppose, right, who's facing who, what's the history, what's the story. So you've got something to take into the commentary booth on show day.
Well, I think something that Rev Pro is really good at, especially, is their storytelling. You see it show to show.
Oh yeah,
we have very clear-cut narratives, and we have fantastic wrestlers that make telling these stories a real dream job. So what's great about being full-time with Rev Pro and not just dropping in and out is that I'm right in the eye of the storm. You know, show to show, I'm calling the action, I'm watching the action, I'm engrossed in the action. So for most shows, I can just think back to the last show, you know, what's happened, what's developed, and any other tidbits or bits of fine tuning. I always bring a sheet of notes with me. You guys saw them at your call. I've got a page for each match, and that means that Copper Box, I'm going to have 10 to 11 pages of notes.
Yeah, it was great to see at York Hall. You are absolutely, like I said at the start of the show, our seats. People don't realize I was at Money in the Bank and I was sat quite high up. I had great view down, but what I kind of missed was I'm so used to hearing like Michael Cole and Wade Barrett talk. when we come and saw you guys in London, people that don't know, we were literally the 2 seats in front of Gio, or the 3 seats. We had Rachel.
Yeah.
So for me, I was getting the great experience of seeing Rev Pro live for the first time. And I had Gio and his colleague literally sitting right behind me, calling the matches. So we got the whole experience. And as like I say, since I got home that day, I signed up to the monthly subscription. I've been listening to you guys do the weekly shows, and it's such a good thing that you guys do. How did you go from the wrestler to the announcer though, Gio? How did that all come about? It's like you say, like Adam said, it's not something that's, if people just think you can sit there and you talk about wrestling, it is so much more than that. I mean, you know, like you mentioned earlier, when your friend says that, what you do, like you watch things like a Michael Cole, and you watch things Jim Ross and Jerry the King. Look, you have to portray a story for the wrestling fans, and you know, Rev Pro go all over the country. So for those of us that are sitting at home, we rely on the likes of you, Gio, to portray what you're seeing live in front of you. How did that all come about for you? How did you find it when you very first started, when you were agreeing to the announce booth? How did you find it all?
Well, my first ever ring announcing job, because I did ring announcing before I did commentary, it was actually for Progress at their first training school. We used to do these in-house shows, training shows for people who are ready to make that jump from the school to the shows. It would be an in-house thing where the trainers and the promoters would come to watch. And John Briley was there. I wasn't there wrestling. I was there to watch. I wasn't ready to wrestle at all, really. Or I was on the verge. But I'm going to put this out there now. I was never a great wrestler, so I'm very thankful I have found a career.
I've done 4 weeks of it. I've done 4 weeks.
4 hardest weeks of your life, I bet, yeah.
Body slam killed me.
Yeah. Well, I was at this in-house show, and John Briley... I can't remember if he was looking for volunteers or if he just picked me out, or he just needed someone to ring announce. He just sort of went, you know, do you want to give it a go? And because it was John Briley asking, and because I take pride in my work, I just threw myself into it. It wasn't even a real microphone. It was the handle of a piece of luggage that had broken off, and
Yes,
it was rubbish in the training school. But I used that as a mic, and I, you know, just did it properly. We all had fun that night, and then when the show was over and John Briley was giving all the students feedback, he came up to me and said, "We've got a show coming up. It's this new thing we're starting called Freedom's Road. Jim won't be traveling down because it's too far. It's too far and takes too long on a weeknight. I don't want to do it. Would you like to do it?" And I'd never done any ring announcing before professionally, apart from pretending a luggage handle was a microphone under a railway arch in Brixton. But of course, I accepted it because we're always told any job you get offered in wrestling, take it. So I did that at Freedom's Road at the Bedford in Balham. Then when Freedom's Road moved to the Dome in Tufnell Park, I also moved over. And that was just such great exposure. And there was a period of time where I was wrestling and doing ring announcing at the same time, but it was clear to everyone, including me, I was much better at the ring announcing than the wrestling. So when I did eventually pick up quite a bad injury to my back in 2019, and I decided it was probably best to stop, I'm very lucky that I already had this resume of announcing to fall back on, and I quickly got picked up by WrestleForce. Actually, I'd like to quickly give a shout out to WrestleForce, one of the most underrated companies in the UK. Gave me one of my first big breaks of announcing. When I announced that I was now a full-time announcer, they gave me all their dates straight away. And if you're looking for some of the most underrated talents in the country ready to make it onto the big scene, and if you want to see some of my tour de force announcing and commentating all in one night, go and check out Mark True versus Kieran Lacey, no disqualification from Romford and Essex.
Let's not talk.
We can't mention that name on this podcast.
Well, he's not very happy with us. You see, we announced we co-produced a show with Ignite back in about a month ago now.
Yeah, a month ago.
And on that show, we announced that we've got our own title, which is going to be defended. It's the Turnbuckle Championship, and it's going to be defended in September. And he's not one of the guys in that match. And suffice to say that he's got the ump so much that he wants to talk to us on the podcast on Friday. So he's
What? Doesn't sound like Mark True. I'm shocked.
Yeah, he's a little guy, little fella.
Yeah, but to be fair to him, without blowing smoke too much, I have seen some of his stuff, and
yeah, I don't want to say too many good things about him, but yeah, he is a tremendous wrestler. Yeah, he's one of the good guys. All joking aside, but Gio, we now know you as the voice of Rev. Has it? I mean, since we've started doing these podcasts, it's opened our minds to even more of the UK scene. Don't get me wrong, we all grew up like you did, WWF guys. That's all we had. We had Sky, we had the WWF. Since we've started doing the Hitting the Turnbuckle and a few other bits and bobs that we've been doing, like the live shows and stuff like that with Ignite, I'm super shocked at the development of English wrestling now. Since I last viewed it to where I am now. Rev Pro, when I attended that show with you guys in London, opened my eyes even more. And we had just been at Money in the Bank the week before, bear in mind. Me and Adam both said this, and you cut us open with Bleed WWE. I said that Rev Pro show we attended was better than Money in the Bank. Has it surprised you the growth of Rev Pro, and has it surprised you the growth of the English wrestling? I mein, you mentioned it a minute ago there. There's so much great talent out in the UK. Honestly, that Rev Pro show I attended, you're gonna have to go some to beat that live show. Obviously, you got the Copper Box coming up in the not so distant future. But the growth of English wrestling, Gio, is absolutely incredible.
It really is, and I think I do have to say I'm very lucky and privileged, as is everyone else who came up through wrestling in my generation, let's call it. You know, I started in 2016 and I got to jump in, you know, right in the bubble, as we call it. But that was thanks to the hard work of all the people that came before us, you know, your Shah Samuelses, your Mark Haskinses, your Pete Dunnes, the people that when British wrestling mostly was relegated to bingo halls and village halls and community centers, you know, those are the people that carried on tirelessly, building it up to the point where when little yuppie Gio comes in 2016, it's built and ready for me to jump in. So the fact that it's just gotten better and better and better, and that some of those guys are still around contributing to this day, we just have to be so thankful. But to see the independent scene grow and to see that attract the bigger names and the bigger companies is really fantastic. And like just this summer has been proof that the UK loves wrestling and deserves wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, we and Adam and Rach were 2 seats away from Will Ospreay. 2 weeks earlier, we saw him on AEW TV on the Forbidden Door having one of the matches of the year with Kenny Omega. So for Rev Pro to get him, and he's a stalwart, you know, he's a Rev Pro guy. I mean, I said this to Adam and Rachel. I mean, do you think that there isn't a limit really for what Rev Pro can do? You've got the online service, the streaming service, you've got the Copper Box coming up. What is the ultimate goal, do you think, for Rev Pro? We've said it a few times on this show. You go back and British promotions have tried. You've seen it on like an ITV on a Saturday night. They've tried it. Someone like Rev Pro in the online streaming service, for me, is the way to go, because I don't see a ceiling for the things like Rev Pro. If you're getting people like Will Ospreay, for argument's sake, and Michael Oku on your wrestling show, you must be doing something absolutely amazing, because they're just them two alone. And I'm not just singling them out. You've got a great roster, unbelievable roster. I don't think there's a ceiling for Rev Pro. I seriously think that someone like a Rev Pro could change the game in the UK, and they've kind of changed it already.
I'm just going to give a quick pause before I give my answer. I'm going to grab my dog because he's whinging.
We love dogs.
Maybe Adam can sing or something. I don't know. You
Me? Sing?
No. Yeah, maybe.
You sure?
No, don't sing. Don't sing. Yeah,
okay.
We'll test your editing skills on YouTube.
Sorry, I don't know what he's whinging about. I've fed him, I've walked him. I don't know what he's doing.
We mentioned Mark. Maybe we mentioned Mark True. He started.
Yeah. Okay, I'll pick up right from the end of your question.
No, you're good, mate. You're good. Yeah, we were just saying about the growth of Rev Pro, and it's incredible, absolutely incredible. I don't think there's a ceiling, is there, for Rev Pro?
I think with Rev Pro, anyone who knows their wrestling knows they're the top dog in the UK. And the goal of Rev Pro since day one has always been to just grow and reach more people and give the best wrestlers the biggest and best platform. And I think it isn't going to end with Rev Pro making it known to the UK that they're the top dog. They want the world to know that they're the top dog. And you can see it. We increase efforts in production, in the names we bring over, in boosting the young talent. If you look at our cards, you can see that the talent is coming from the Portsmouth School of Wrestling, from the London School of Wrestling. You know, people call Rev Pro a lot of things. People, you know, they used to, and I think a few people still do, just call it Andy Quilden's Dream Factory. Some people say it's the real home of British strong style. But now I think you're seeing more and more the investment in young stars, the investments in characters and storylines paying off. And if you, for example, just look at the card for this 11-year anniversary show, it would be so easy for Andy to, you know, really reach into his pockets and just see who was released by WWE in the last 90 days or call in any old big name. But he's made a Rev Pro card. If you look at all the announced matches, it's Rev Pro stars. And when you do have an import or a big name, it's against someone made by Rev Pro, and it makes sense. It's a homegrown card. It's a celebration of pro wrestling at its best.
Yeah, most definitely. Sorry, that's got me.
Yeah, we're literally going to touch on the Copper Box show. I unfortunately can't make it, but Andy, I know you're going, and I know Dave, our other co-host, is going. I apologise in advance for not being able to attend. It's Daddy Day, and I need to be doing my dad duties. But anyway, you mentioned big names, Mickey James being one of those big names, and that match was announced, Alex Windsor, Hyan, and Mickey James. But that just goes to show the pull of Rev Pro in the States already. The fact that you can bring a name like Mickey James over and put her on the card, just as I said, just basically shows that pool that you've already got.
Absolutely. It goes back to what I said. Rev Pro wants you to know it's the top dog, and we put our money where our mouth is, you know? We've said we're going to put on the biggest show in Rev Pro history, and I'd argue it goes up with any other show you can call the biggest in British history. Obviously, we haven't got the backing that AEW has. No one does at the independent level. But when you look at the independent level, I could argue this is the biggest show in British independent wrestling history.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. The one match I'm looking forward to, I'm gutted I'm going to miss, is Ricky Knight Jr. and Zack Sabre Jr.
Oh, that's going to be an absolute barnstorm.
Apart from the fact, well, actually, I'm kind of thinking that Colin Mills isn't on the card because he ended up in my lap at 229. You know it very well.
That was one of the most hectic endings to a show I've ever been a part of. I was Andy and I were freaking out, wondering when the match was even going to start.
Yeah, it took. I mean, that all that kicked off in the crowd and that was before the bell had rung.
Oh, you can see if you go back on my Instagram, you can see me and Andy just begging Oscar to do something about it.
I was trying to pick up Colin Mills. As I say, he got flung about 4 rows forward by Robbie X at the time. But I mean that alone, and what impressed me about Rev Pro when we went to Epic Encounters, Andy, at the Bethnal Green show, was, and it's going to sound totally ridiculous, but we walked in, we're like, you've got screens, you've got a commentary booth, you've got this entranceway, you've got, you know, the smoke, not necessarily full pyro, but you've got the smoke side of things. So as you rightfully said, Gio, the production part of Rev Pro is also getting up to a standard which is already miles ahead of a lot of what the UK guys can do. But why don't you tell the people that what they can expect from the Copper Box show? Is there going to be surprises? I know you can't tell us if there is going to be a surprise. You can't tell us who, but you know,
Gio's coming out of retirement. He's in the main event.
Yeah. What can you tell us? But what can everyone expect from the Copper Box show?
Well, we talk about how electric the atmosphere is at York Hall all the time. So take that and magnify it by a very big number. We at Rev Pro bring it every time. It doesn't matter the size of the building or how many fans are going to be in the building. Everyone always gives 110%. But when you add in the very bright lights of the Copper Box, the fact that it's one of our largest attendances, possibly of all time, the quality of talent on the card, and the fact that more eyes will be on Rev Pro than ever, everyone's going to be bringing their A game. Everyone's going to be showing the world why individually they should be looked at, but also why Rev Pro as a whole is a force to be reckoned with. People are going to be leaving that show thinking, got to get some more. And that's the goal, is just to get more and more people through the doors of Rev Pro, because it takes exactly one Rev Pro show to make you a fan for life.
That is exactly what happened when we went. As soon as we finished Epic in Canada, it was like, right, when's the next London show? I mean, obviously there was Copperbot, it was 229. I think we've purchased pretty much tickets now until the end of the year at 2.
Yeah, Gio, just release season tickets. I think we're going to buy them, mate. I think we're just going to turn up to pretty much every London event you've got. We've met
the best investment you can make, honestly.
Yeah, I literally got home that day from the London show after we met you, Gio. Signed up for the monthly subscription. So I know you guys are traveling the country. I know you're down in Portsmouth. I know you. I can literally sit on my laptop or on my phone, wherever I am, and watch Rev Pro. That's like, if you go back 10, 15 years, you could do that for any British promotion. You could do that for WWE. This is before WWE Network. So Rev Pro are so fun. They are the mainstay for us for British promotion. And that's credit to you guys. That's credit to Andy. That's credit to the amazing roster that you built. And like you say, once you go to a Rev Pro show, and I urge anyone to go. I know it's quite a big weekend for wrestling, the weekend you've got on the Copper Box. I can guarantee you're going to be better than that other company at Wembley Stadium. I can guarantee you that. No, I didn't mean that, Dave.
The whole weekend is going to be amazing.
Yeah, it's do you know what? It's going to be a great weekend to just be a wrestling fan, Gio. It's going to be an absolute, and it just proves how I get all my American friends saying, still to this day, they're going, oh, wrestling. I'm like, wrestling is, I can't explain to you how big it is. I get it all the time with my NFL podcast. Oh, is the NFL really big in the UK? We sell out Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. We sell out Wembley Stadium. Rev Pro are going to the Copper Box. AEW have sold out Wembley Stadium without even announcing a match up until 2 weeks ago.
Wrestling cool. What can we say?
You know. But Gio, thank you so much for your time, my friend. It was honestly, you made our day about a month and a half ago when we were with you guys in London. It was great to sit in front of you. It's been great to get to know you a little bit since the event and have you on our podcast. We wish you all great success at the Copper Box. We'll definitely come and say hi to you. I know you're gonna be super, super busy that day, my friend. But honestly, we just keep doing what you're doing, brother. And I hope Rev Pro just keeps going and going and going.
I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for having me on. And I will definitely be seeing you guys at the Copper Box and many other shows with that season pass you're going to grab. So,
yeah.
Andy, if you're listening, I want a bit of commission for that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, there you go. Hook Gio up, Andy. He's doing God's work here. But ladies and gentlemen, this has been a great another episode of the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast. I've been your host, Andy Burrows, with my good friend and co-host, Mr. Adam Cousins. Till next time, everybody, buckle down and stay safe.